Hi, it's Chris Titley here. As part of this week's episode of Scoreboard, I'm chatting to Elyse Villani. Elyse, thank you so much for being part of Scoreboard.
Pleasure. Thanks very much for having me, Chris.
Elyse, how's your morning? We're on the 17th of March, Monday morning. What's Elyse been doing this morning?
I started the morning with a coffee, a little bit of study, actually. I've gone back to do some study, then a bit of physio treatment, and then back here with you with my second coffee of the morning.
Second coffee of the morning. Are you a two-coffee person?
Yes, and sometimes if it's been a bit of a longer day, I do dabble into the third coffee.
Right. You don't get the shakes like some of our guests get at the sleeping shakes?
Not off a week flat white, I don't know.
Not off a week flat white, yes. And being in March, your 2025, how's it started?
Yeah, look, not too bad. We've sort of come to the end of the season now, so that all wrapped up probably a couple of weeks ago. So I guess it's now into the reviews and the reflections of the season, and then heading into off-season, so that's not too far away.
Yeah, no, excellent. And then reflecting on 2024, you want to give the listeners a bit of a reflection inside track already about how you're reflecting on 2024?
Yeah, look, we've got our meetings coming up. So in terms of being a part of the Cricket TAS program, we have skills meetings with the coaches. We have Triple SM meetings. We have a psych meeting, a dietitian meeting. And I think that just about rounds up all the resourcing meeting. So we'll tick all those boxes. There's fitness testing. There's, thinking about what the off season looks like, what your pre-season is going to look like heading into next season. So, just ticking all those boxes and making sure that everyone's clear heading into the break.
Yeah, and just touching on that and all these resources and all these types of reflections and tools, I suppose, that you've got at your fingertips. This probably wouldn't have had this when you first started playing professional cricket. Do you want to talk about the importance and the transition of how women's cricket has sort of come leaps and bounds?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like it's actually a really cool, personal journey that I've been on, because I've been able to experience both ends of the spectrum. So I feel like for me, that's actually been a really cool thing to, experience, because there's been so many great lessons along the way. And I feel very fortunate to have been able to experience that. I remember back when I first started, I was, just like a lot of other young kids growing up, thinking about what I'm going to do once I finish school. Obviously, being a professional athlete wasn't in the cards. It wasn't possible. I knew that I wanted to keep playing cricket, but it was just more of a hobby. I went to uni full-time, did my teaching degree, which I actually really enjoyed. And I feel like coming through the setup now, going to full-time uni on campus is pretty impossible for the athletes coming through now. So to have that life experience, I thought it was great. The training was, very different back then. It was only a couple of nights or a couple of mornings a week, and it was always before and after the work hours. So we would sort of get into the gym at like 6:30, and you would sort of train from like 7 till 9:30 at night. So, it wasn't a very sustainable sort of life, I guess. And I feel like that's why a lot of women, when they sort of got to about 30, they were sort of transitioning out of the sport and into real life, so to speak. So I remember, always driving back from Junction Oval in Melbourne, driving back through like Gosh's Paddock, where obviously Collingwood and the Melbourne Football Club play, and driving home to mum and dad's and thinking, man, I wish I could be like those boys playing footy, like they'd be tucked up in bed right now and they would have already done their full day of training and they've got such cool resourcing and they're professional athletes. Like, if I could ever be a professional athlete and basically write that down as my profession, like I feel like I would have made it. And then I feel like things changed really quickly throughout a few years where that actually became real life for me, and something that I never thought would happen in my lifetime then happened really quickly. And so to be able to, play for Australia as a full-time professional athlete, I was like, this is sick. Like, this is living. Like, this is awesome. Like, I get to travel internationally, and on my travel card, and they say, what is your profession? I write athlete. I mean, I felt like a bit of a fraud, to be honest. And then not only that, but transitioning out of the Aussie stuff and then still being able to call myself a professional athlete and playing at a state level was, definitely something I didn't think would be possible. So I feel like I got to live sort of two lives as a professional athlete when I thought that at the time growing up, neither of those would have ever been possible.
That's just awesome. I'm interested to know as well now, like the levels of you're playing fun and you're enjoying cricket, and then you're going, actually, I'm getting paid for this now. Has it always been still fun, or is there like now this a very serious role because it is our living?
Yeah, I feel like it's interesting question, and it sort of depends on where you're at, maybe individually. Like, I definitely can't answer that for anyone else. And they say that you can't buy experience, and I definitely feel like that is the case. And who I am now as a cricketer is completely different to who I was as a cricketer 18 seasons ago. And I've definitely gone through all the feelings, all the highs and the lows of being a professional cricketer. It's not only being a professional athlete, but it's also a very unique sport where you're playing a team sport, but in fact, there's so many individual aspects within that team sport. So it's almost like an individual sport within a team sport, and it's just really unique in that manner. And it can lend itself to being really hard on yourself. Particularly as a batter, and you've got no control over selection. There's a lot of things outside of your control, which you really grapple with. It's not like, I suppose, going for a sport, the Olympics, and if you make that time, then you're through to the Olympics. You can make runs, you can be in form, but ultimately the decision on whether you progress is not up to you. And I've really struggled with that at times as well, because you're, instinctively putting yourself against others, and you might feel like you're in a better position than them, and you're not getting picked. And I've definitely felt that throughout my career. But then on the flip side, I've also felt on the other side of the coin where I'm like, geez, I'm not going so well and I'm still in the side, and I feel like this person's playing better than me. So it is funny how that happens. I probably debuted for Australia when I definitely wasn't ready, and they saw something in me that I definitely didn't see in myself. And I was sort of pushed through that pretty quickly. And I've learnt so much about myself over the last 18 seasons, and it's now that I can reflect on that time of my life and be like, geez, I was not ready to play for Australia. Like, I wasn't a professional athlete. I wasn't ready to compete at the highest level. I didn't know myself as a person. I didn't know myself as a cricketer. And I feel like you need to have a good grip on both of those things to make it, I guess, at a professional level. And you can be in a bubble a lot of the time as well. And I felt like that's what, sort of lent itself to probably not enjoying myself at different times when I'm getting too caught up on results, selection, all that sort of stuff. Whereas when you sort of take it back to the game, and the game that you love, and, make it more about a team game, that for me has meant that I've really enjoyed the last couple of years, probably since coming out of the Aussie system, where thinking about what does motivate me, what I love most about the game, and being able to stay pretty consistent with that, as much as I can, has lent itself to really enjoying the environment, really believing in, the vision and the goals that I've wanted to achieve for not only myself but the team, and really getting a kick out of that. And I feel like that's probably also what I've loved most about leadership, is that it's brought me a different type of enjoyment into the game, where I'm not just thinking about my own individual results. And I suppose in a way it's made me like a less selfish athlete, which I think has really worked for me personally as well, not just for enjoyment, but probably form-wise as well.
You reckon that's the teaching degree as well, helping at some point as well?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I just think throughout your journey, like, that there's so many things that you can, that other people would have told me when I was coming up through the ranks, and, things that I'm sort of trying to tell other people coming up through the ranks now. But ultimately, you sort of learn at your own speed, and you learn through, your own life experiences, and you've got to sort of figure out a lot of stuff yourself. and you hope that you figure it out before it's too late. And you hope that other people figure it out before it's too late as well, because you never know when your opportunities are going to dry up. But I do feel like, the last few years, just generally in the broader world, there's so much focus on self-awareness and just learning more about yourself and other people, and understanding the greater impacts that can have on yourself just in everyday life, as well as being an athlete. I feel like through paying more attention to that sort of stuff has definitely allowed me to reflect on things a little bit differently and take more accountability and understand the broader picture of things, and not be so tunnel visioned, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, mindfulness is a phrase which has come to fruition probably the last couple of years, and I think there's a lot of benefits in that. I'm going to touch on something you mentioned then around selection and around the bubble, like getting picked for Australia, dream come true, but then the pressure of like performing to stay in the team versus performance of what you've probably been picked for, and a few things going through your head. How did you balance that? You mentioned it was a bit difficult at the time to sort of like this high of being picked, but then it's like, well, you're a couple of ducks away from you're gone.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, I probably didn't handle it as well as I would have liked to. I probably didn't have the skill set off the field to manage, the roller coaster that is elite sport. And I probably found, value in the team psychologists later on in my career. And that's also a resource that has been really heavily invested in over the last few years as well. It probably wasn't a big thing back when I first, made my debut and first was coming up through the ranks. So it wasn't a heavily utilized resource. It probably wasn't heavily available either. And that's certainly gathered a lot of momentum over the last, 10 or so years. And you can absolutely see why, because, having those skills in your armory for all the things that you can't control is really important. And I just feel like ultimately it's something that you can't necessarily prepare for either, because like where you're seen within, on a selection table, that naturally within teams, there's people that get more chances than other people. And where you fall within that pecking order is just something that you can't control. So, you always see in teams that some individuals get more opportunities, or and I guess I was one of those people that was always sort of on the fringe a little bit, which certainly made it more difficult for me. In terms of, I used to think like, if I was really settled in this team, like maybe I could go out and play with freedom, like maybe I could go out there and really express myself. And if I wasn't worried about selection, then I would be able to go out and play like these other people that I'm seeing. But ultimately, like that's just thinking like that is not achieving anything. And the reality is that is high performance sport, and you need to be able to manage those feelings, those uncomfortable feelings, and the fact that you don't have control over those things. And I feel like that was a lesson that I learned probably too late in my Australian career, where I needed to just accept just accept where I was and all the things that I can't control, but have more, I guess, more of an understanding of who I wanted to be as an athlete and who I wanted to be as a player, and be really strong on that. And if I went out there and failed, then failing in a manner that I'm proud of, rather than failing trying to like fit into a certain box or a certain mold or bat like somebody else. Or I feel like, of course you've got to take on feedback from coaches and all that sort of stuff. But ultimately filtering out what works for you and what doesn't is another skill. And really understanding your own individual strengths is something that I think is critical in performing in high performance, because instead of chasing your tail every single time you don't perform, you can understand like, okay, well, it didn't come off today, but I know that this for me is a recipe for success. And if I stick with it, I'm going to have the best chance of being successful. it may not guarantee success all the time, but nothing is guaranteed in elite sport. But at least I can be really happy and really proud of the way that I go about it.
Whereas that's a really good way of looking at things, to be honest, and like acceptance, as you mentioned, of rejection, of like you're not getting picked, or but in the sense of you being comfortable with you giving everything that you've got to get to a particular point. I mean, must be incredibly tough to kind of be rejected or not picked in a team when you think you're getting picked in a team, or not playing in the team where you think you can have a better role. But then I suppose, as you mentioned, with a bit of age and a bit of understanding of who you are and experience, that you go, well, actually, I'll give it my all, and they're not going to pick me. That's okay, because I can go and do these things to try and get to that level, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. And you just spend so much energy. Like, ultimately, you've got no control over any of that stuff. So all you're doing is you're just spending more energy that you don't have and could be better spent on, really positive things for yourself as a person or you as an athlete in your own game. And yeah, I probably just didn't work that out quick enough.
But when you were picked and you were performing at your best, what was Elyse's superpower? What was something that you had that others didn't have?
Well, I feel like when I was at my best, I was really hitting the ball. I was taking the bowlers on. Walking down the wicket, I used to watch Maddie Hayden do that, and I used to love that. And I just thought, geez, that's like a bit of an alpha move. And so, yeah.
Against Zimbabwe, was it 380 or something? Yeah. Like he just kept on walking down the deck.
Exactly. So I felt like, I was one of those people that was happy to walk at a bowler, try and hit them back down the ground, and also just jump on anything short. I used to love the pull shot. Used to want to take on spin. So, when I was at my best, I was really clear on how I wanted to play, and I was really enjoying it as well. I was playing with a smile on my face, and I just had that self-belief where I was like, all right, well, if this comes off, like, I can absolutely like make a bit of a statement here, and just have a bit of I mean, I'm not sure if you can say this, but they call it a bit of like a big dick energy out there, and I used
BDE. I've heard it before in a previous podcast.
Yeah, yep. So it's like, all right, I could. I know I'm playing with like Elyse Perry and I'm playing with Meg Lanning and I'm playing with amazing players, but I'm like, I could have some BDE out here as well, and I can really set a platform for these guys to come in after me.
Yeah, no, awesome. I'm also curious as to know why batting, and where did the batting come from, and what you love about batting.
Well, that's actually a really interesting question, because I tell this story all the time. I'm the youngest of four, so I've got three older brothers, and we used to play backyard cricket all the time. We used to play holidays at the beach. We used to, like, any chance we could, we were playing hallway cricket, we were playing in the rumpus room. And I never got to bat. So I always talk about how, it sort of went in age order, and my third brother, he has had a real attitude problem growing up, and he used to crack the shits. And so the game was over before I got a chance to bat. And so I feel like maybe instinctively it's come from actually not getting a bat growing up, is that I fell in love with batting. And I always talk about how I should have been like this amazing fielder, because that's all I did, but I'm not. So I don't know what happened there. I think the dogs outfielded me every time. But yeah, I just feel like, I don't know, there's something about it where it's bloody hard. It's really hard to bat. Like, there's so many shots, there's so many skills and tactics and conditions, and you're always trying to improve. Every game's different, every opposition's different, every bowler, and it's a little bit of cat and mouse. Like, what are they going to do? How am I going to combat this? How am I going to score? How can I score in these conditions? What are they thinking here? Like, are they double bluffing me? And there's just like, I love that. Like, I love the tactics of batting, and I love that competitiveness. It's like me versus the bowler. And I just fell in love with that, because it was so tough and such a tough battle.
Yeah, the bowler versus batter battle, from your point of view, who's in control?
Well, I feel like a bowler just comes in and it's like they know what they're going to bowl. And so you've got to kind of, I don't know, like if you're a smart batter, I feel like you can take control of a bowler. And that's what I love about it, because at times they're definitely, you feel like the bowler's in control. Like, you feel like, they're coming in and they're bowling this ball, and it's like you've got to actually react to that. So, they've got the first part of control. But if you can get on top of them, somehow you can maneuver that so that you're in control. And it's like that probably shouldn't always happen, and I love that.
Yeah, and then some keys to batting for some of the younger listeners out there.
Some keys to batting. I would just sort of think like finding out your individual strengths is a massive one, because no two people bat the same. I don't think you should look at anyone else and be like, oh, I want to bat like them. You've got to kind of find your own style. You've got to work out, how you want to bat. And then the quicker you find out your strengths and weaknesses, the quicker you can really make your strengths super strengths and go after and attack. And when you understand your weaknesses, it's more about managing those rather than getting too wrapped up and, trying to change them into strengths or anything like that. Sorry.
Bless you. This is what we call an authentic podcast, where it's not scripted, and we have people sneeze, and it's okay because that's what people do.
And I just feel like instead of thinking that you need to nail everything, like no person is great at every shot in every condition. No one has, they talk about a 360 game, but no one has a complete 360 game. If you're strong in something, you have to be deficient in something else. But if you can understand that and manage that, you can score. And if you can score off lots of different bowlers, I mean, that's where the fun comes in. And that's where batting can be really fun. And then just working out, I basically feel like it's how do you score, working out how you score. Like never think about how am I going to survive? How am I going to not get out? Like having a really positive mindset when you bat and thinking about how am I going to score will hold you in a really good stead, because if you're thinking about scoring first, you can defend second. Whereas if you're thinking about defending, you're missing out on so many scoring opportunities.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way of thinking about it, because I think people get caught up with a good bowler, like, oh my goodness, this bowler's fast, or this bowler's spitting it a lot, and I just need to get through and be at the other end, right? And there's a different mindset in that as opposed to score. You did touch on being yourself in terms of being a batter, but then we saw Sam Constance during the Boxing Day Test match, and all my 12-year-old and 10-year-old were straight at the backyard doing reverse ramps and all that sort of stuff. So the game is changing a lot, and it's obviously changed a lot since you've become a professional. How have you adapted to the changing game as a player, as opposed to sort of defending your wicket and looking to score in Test cricket, to then 2020 going, we just need to score off every ball?
Yeah, I feel like it's something that as a cricketer and as a batter in particular, like you're always tinkering with a little bit, and that's what your pre-seasons are for, and just sort of working out like, oh, where can I expand my game? Like where, like I was actually reading some like reviews from like 10 years ago, and I was always talking about like, oh, I want to, like I can't score to third. Like if I look at my wagon wheel, like I can't score to third. And it's like, I reckon for a few years, I was trying to like work out how am I going to score it to third, like off a pace bowler, all this kind of stuff. And then it's like, now that I'm a bit older, I'm like, that's just ridiculous. Like, I feel like you should know, like, especially the older you get and the more balls that you hit, like you should know if something feels like, oh, I reckon I can play this shot. Like this actually feels natural to me in a sense. And if I keep working at it, I can get really good at this shot. Whereas some shots, it's like, well, that's really unnatural for me. I don't feel like that fits. And so instead of just like banging your head against a brick wall, it's like, well, how else can I maybe access that area? Like, does it have to look like everyone else? And it's like, talk about Sam Constance, and it's like, that's where the reverse ramps and stuff come in. And I feel like once you play around with things, and you're just open-minded and you just look at sections of the ground, and instead of thinking like, oh, to get to this section of the ground, I need to play this shot with this straight bat or anything like that. It's more like, how can I get the ball there? Like, how does that work with my game? What feels good? Like, so just, every preseason, like being prepared to look silly in the nets, being prepared to fail is really important. And having fun with that stuff and just working out how can I, and if I can, what does it look like? And if I can't, well, if they bowl this ball that a lot of people hit to this area, where can I hit it? How can I still score off this? So yeah, just sort of, yeah, I guess, yeah, being really inquisitive and curious, and not being afraid to look silly.
And when it's paid off and you've done that in the training sessions, do you want to talk about the innings that's one of the most memorable for you?
What has been really memorable? Probably, I don't know if there's a particular innings, but I would say, thinking about when I've been able to bring a shot into my game and what that's meant for me. So I think about, fast bowling, for instance. Once I brought in ramping into my game, I'm like, whoa, that really opened up some things, because I used to love going at the bowlers and they would bowl hard length. So I really wanted to, get on the front foot and drive balls, or, if they dropped it short, then pull balls. But hard length, it's like, it's a really challenging delivery for a batter. And so once I, was able to bring in ramping, for instance, I'm like, oh, beautiful. Like, this is, a bowler can't just come in and settle on a length to me, because I can actually exploit other areas, and it allows you to sort of open up that extra gap. So, and then I think about spin, for instance. Again, I used to love like using my feet and driving the ball. Once I learned how to sweep and reverse sweep, that just changed the game, because then it actually opens up your strength again, your original strength, and then you get more of those deliveries. So yeah, it hasn't really been about an individual innings, but there's been moments in games where I'm like, beautiful, like this is, this used to be a delivery or a field that used to really, tie me down, and now I can score off this.
Just talking about moments for a second, the big pressure moments towards the end of your career. Have you found those big moments like this, you're thriving on that, as opposed to maybe early in the career, you're like, I'm a bit nervous?
Absolutely. I think earlier in my career, I used to sort of shit the bed a little bit. And I used to think like, oh, someone else can have this. I think
I don't want to face this last over or whatever it might be.
Exactly.
Yeah,
it's like, I think this moment might be better suited to someone with more skill or someone more experienced. And I think that probably came down to a self-belief thing as well, in terms of like, oh, I'm not sure I'm ready for this. I don't back myself in this moment. And then now it's kind of like you kind of, it's funny, you like live for those moments, because you're like, yeah, I believe in myself. I feel like the team backs me. You've just got a bit more perspective, and just wanting to be in the fight and wanting to be in the contest, I think, is the biggest thing. You're absolutely not going to excel every time in those pressure moments, but wanting to be in them, I think, is the most important thing.
Yeah, it seems to me like you've got a huge amount of confidence and acceptance and resilience, I suppose, now in your career. Was there a particular time or team or moment where you kind of that flicked the switch around, let's go out and do the best I can, be creative, be confident. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Was there some moment that you kind of remember?
Getting dropped from the Aussie team at when that happened, that was probably about 6 years ago now, I think. And I've sort of been in and out of the team, throughout sort of a 10-year Australian career. And I sort of always felt like I could get back in. If I made runs, I could get back in. But I guess I knew when it happened that last time that I felt like the team was going in a new direction, and I felt like they weren't going to come back to me. And although I had sort of discussions and was assured that I wasn't out of, out of it completely, I sort of always felt like maybe I was. And for that first 12 months, everything was about getting back into the Australian team. I wanted to make runs to get back into that Australian team. I wanted to prove, this person right. I wanted to prove this person wrong. And it was all about everyone else. And I got to the end of that season, and I had a terrible season. I didn't enjoy it. I made no runs. Probably also wasn't the best teammate. It's pretty self-absorbed, I reckon. And I remember we had to do this exercise was part of the Victorian team at the time, and we went to the mind room, and we had to write ourselves a letter to our younger selves. And I remember writing that, and that was actually really good therapy for me in a way, because what was really coming up was the fact that I put so much of my self-worth into how many runs I scored or what teams I was being selected for. And I sort of, wrote that letter, and I was like, it doesn't matter how many runs you make. It doesn't matter what teams you make. Like, you used to enjoy this game, and I really want you to always enjoy this game. And I just felt like that was really cleansing for me. And in that moment, I promised that I wouldn't think about Australian selection anymore, that I would be really focused on other people and my teammates, and really invested in those around me, really invested in the team vision, and really mostly invested in enjoying it and just trying to be the best cricketer that I could be, and trying to work out what my ceiling was, that I believed, rather than, what other people thought. And most importantly, I wanted to turn the word failure into not a dirty word anymore. I think it's always a bit of a dirty word, like, oh, you don't want to fail, fear of failure. But in reality, elite sport is all about failure. You fail way more than you succeed. And I wanted to turn that around and turn it into positive failures. So when I fail, I want it to be a positive. I want to make positive mistakes. I want to make positive errors. And I want to stick true to that no matter what. And that was my biggest challenge. And the very next season, I've still got that letter. I still keep that letter. And I wrote that, probably about 6 years ago. And, I read it every now and then. I found it the other day in my bedside table, and I was like, oh yeah, this is where I was at. And for me, since then, I've had real clarity on who I am as a batter, who I want to be, and how I want to go about the rest of my career. And it doesn't matter what coach I have or what team I play for. I want to be really consistent in that. And that's probably where the switch sort of got flicked for me. And sort of on one hand, I sort of feel like, I wish I had have found that earlier. I wonder what could have been. But if you spend too much time in that sort of thought process, then you're back to square one. So I instead like to think that I've really enjoyed these last 5 years of my career, and I've felt like I've actually become a better player since leaving the Australian environment. And I certainly feel like I've become a better teammate, and I've absolutely loved the game. To still love the game as much as I do at the age that I am, I feel very grateful to be in that position.
Elyse, that's so powerful, and I suggest you keep that letter and read it out to young girls or girls that are making their debut as well, in terms of around their selection and maybe the nerves that they're feeling about. I want to go back to something you said earlier in the podcast around cricket's an individual game, but it's also a team game. It sounds to me like there's a lot of individual focus leading up to that moment of being selected for Australia, but then coming back to going, yes, I need to be an individual, but there's also a team, and I need to play a role within a team, and with a successful team and team dynamic probably uplifts the individual, which you're probably seeing the last couple of years as well in regards to enjoying the game again.
Absolutely. And when I think about who I am as a person, I love working with other people. I've always really enjoyed teamwork in all different sorts of sport. I know a lot of people hate group assignments and all that sort of thing, but I've always really enjoyed working with other people and found that that's, brought me an extra level of motivation. So to make it more about the team, because I genuinely enjoy that, you're absolutely right. It allows me to probably play better as an individual within the team, because my motivation is the team goal, and it allows me to relax as an individual. And when I'm relaxed, when I'm enjoying it, then the results are generally better. So it definitely works for me, and that's the best thing about being within a team sport as well, because when I get into the change rooms, if I've made a duck or not made any runs, I still feel like I can contribute to the team through my attitude, through my efforts. There's so many things that don't count on the scoreboard, so to speak, but the little 1%ers, they make a big difference. How you make other people feel within the team, how how you can make other people feel believed in, to bring out their best selves, I think is something that everyone can do. And just enjoying and relishing other people's successes, and knowing that within a team sport, it's swings and roundabouts. And if it's not your turn, it will be one day. And how you can be genuinely happy for your teammates and how they're genuinely happy for you. I think sitting in a change room after a team win, that's the best feeling.
Yeah, and just touching on that point of getting a duck, and you're a batter, and you get a duck, and your job is to get runs, but you get a duck. And I see this now in kids sport where there's the head's down and there's feeling, which means you care, right? And there's an element of like caring if you in your own mind fail. But I think the key, in which you've sort of touched on, is right. Okay, so I've got a duck. What can I do now? And you can get into the field. You can encourage your other batters. And then you might like take a ripper of a catch, or you might do a direct hit run out, which changes the game, and then all of a sudden wins the game, and you can contribute in other ways to going, well, I am a batter, but I'm also a team member, instead of like having the head down and going, well, I failed the team, I let the whole team down. So I just think what you've said, needs to be encouraged to some of the junior people, because I do see a lot of emotion when it's like this failure.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing is, like, attitude is really infectious as well. So, if you're on the flip side and someone's really down and out, and they're really, drop their head, I mean, how that then impacts the rest of the team can be quite significant as well. And you don't want to be that player, because you don't want to make your teammates feel like that. And it's almost like, putting a pin in it in that moment. It's like, like today has not been my day with the bat, and I'm going to review and I'm going to reflect on that after the game. But right now I've got a job to do, and me being disappointed or me being really low right now isn't going to change that fact. There's actually nothing right now that I can do that's going to change the outcome that's just happened from a batting point of view. So then it's like, as you mentioned, it's like getting out there and thinking, how can I still impact, and understanding that what you can still do for the team has a bigger impact than what you probably feel like at the time. And the more consistent you can be, and the more consistent your attitude can be, I genuinely believe that puts you in better stead moving forward for future games, because, as I mentioned earlier, you absolutely fail more times than you succeed. But there's always something you can do to contribute to your team.
And at least cricket's a long game, longer than most other sports. Or the 2020 is obviously shortened, etc. But the mental capacity and the switching on and switching off, how do you find that, being in the field or being batting at the non-strikers end, to kind of your mind drifts a little?
Yeah, I think it's, again, just coming down to acceptance and not fighting it. So you will drift, and that's okay. Just making sure you drift at the right times, I think, is the key. You can't be switched on all the time. So recognizing, I'm drifting here. Like, is it an issue? No, it's not right now. Like, this is okay. This is a good time to drift. And at this point in time, I'm going to, come back to my cues, and I'm going to make sure I'm switched on. So just understanding the timings, I guess, of when that's really important, and understanding your cues as well. So if you do feel like you're drifting off more than usual, being really clear on what brings you back to the present is really important. And those cues, they look completely different from everyone.
Your relationship with cricket has had its ups and downs, as you've discussed, and life as a professional athlete is finite. What do you think your relationship with cricket will be in, say, 10 years' time?
I think it will be positive. I feel like, 6 years ago it was probably at its lowest, and I remember saying to someone, it felt like I was in a relationship and I got completely blindsided by the thing that I loved the most in the world. And that's what it felt like at the time. I felt like I was going through this breakup where I had absolutely no control, and I still wanted to be together with cricket, and cricket didn't want to be with me. So,
it's not you, it's me.
Yeah. So, that took some time. I definitely had a grieving period with that, but finding the love for the game again, I feel like that's, so special, because not everyone leaves the game still loving it. A lot of athletes can leave the game feeling really bitter, and I've been determined not to feel like that, because the game has given me so much, and I know that I've given a lot of love and a lot of time to cricket, but cricket has always given me back more than I could ever give the sport. And I would love to stay involved in the game post playing, and I just feel like I'm really passionate about the sport. I'm really passionate about the people within it. And I absolutely love it. So I do feel really fortunate that in 10 years' time, I would love to have kids and for them to love cricket as much as I do.
And Elyse, you excited about the next decade of women's cricket as well?
Excited, absolutely. I feel like, I was really fortunate in my era to get more opportunities than those that came before me. And I feel like it's going to continue on that trajectory. And I'm really excited to see what the future generations can give to cricket with the resourcing that they get and how they can continue to inspire the next generation, which I think is really powerful.
And how have you gone with people recognising you, and now things like Instagram and social media and comments and selfies and trading cards and you being on posters? My 10-year-old actually pulled one of your trading cards the other day as well, which is fabulous to see. But reflecting on that little girl dreaming and seeing the men out there and your brothers not letting you have a bat, etc. How do you feel now?
Yeah, look, I don't think it's something that I fully understand. And can appreciate, if that makes sense. I know that, walking around in Tassie, my partner always says, like, geez, I think you should grow your hair because too many people recognize you because of your hair. And you sort of get stopped and chatted to, asking, how's the team going? How's the season going? Or, getting wished like good luck for the upcoming games. And I just think that's so cool to, be able to have that relationship with, people that you come, and I genuinely appreciate, the support for myself and for the game and for women's cricket as well. And it's something that I absolutely never thought would ever come to light. And obviously, you get with the positives, the negatives come as well. And just being really smart with social media, I think, is important. I know that you can block things like words and comments and all that sort of stuff. And, being really conscious about when you're on social media and, how your moods might be impacted, and just being really educated in that space is hugely important, because the more you are in the public light, the more you open yourself up to keyboard warriors. And that's where it's really important to have those positive support networks around you to navigate, those unique things that come with being a professional athlete. But for the most part, it's, incredible to be able to give young girls and boys high fives and, chatting to people's parents and chatting to supporters and just feeling the love, really.
Do you find the followers on Instagram are, broadly speaking, like your tribe, the people that kind of support you, or is there a bit of mixed bag across the keyboard warriors versus the people that actually genuinely want to follow you and want to interact with you?
I would say for the most part, I feel like it's a community and I feel really well supported. And I don't think it's the followers that are the keyboard warriors. I think they're probably the ones that just sort of jump on and off the bandwagon, so to speak. But in terms of actually the followers, I feel genuinely supported and appreciated and loved as a person and as an athlete. And I feel like they understand that you're only ever trying your best. And, you're doing the best you can, like anyone in life.
Elyse Villani, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much for being on Scoreboard, the podcast, and sharing your life and sharing everything about your life in terms of when you were growing up to where you are now as a professional athlete, and where the game of women's cricket hopefully goes in the next 10 years and continues to shine, and your enthusiasm and love for the game continues, because that's a very healthy thing. And I wish you all the best in the coming seasons, and look forward to following your progress.
Thanks very much, Chris. Thanks for having me.